doing a great work today. His work hasn't ended just because he died. He said in one of his epistles that I will stand at the gates of heaven and waiting until my last spiritual child enters. So consecrate yourself to Saint Padre Pio. Become his spiritual child. Send your guardian angel to him. He asked people to do that to him when he was on earth. Why not stop? Why stop doing it now? You can still send him your angel. And you can still consecrate him and make yourself his child. And he will still wait at the heavenly gates, as he said he would, waiting for you to enter, meaning he will pray that you get there. I recall, as I have in the past, meeting with my mentor in exorcisms, Father Gabriel Amorth, who went to St. Padre Pio. He visited him many times. And one time, when he went to Padre Pio, he said, Padre, can you take my spiritual children under your protection so that I may be reassured that none of them will be lost? And Padre Pio looked at him intensely, smiled, and said, Va bene, figliolo, va bene. He said, yes, my son, yes. And then Father Amorth, jokingly, with his humor from Modena, Italy, where he came from, said, okay, Padre Pio, now they will no longer call you Padre Pio, but Grandpa Pio, because I'm their Padre, you're the grandpa. And Padre Pio chuckled. He had a good sense of humor, you know. Sometimes when people laugh, they make jokes. People say, oh, you're taking your religion too lightly. Well, they miss the whole point of the joy of the saints. You know, Jesus tells Louisa to have the house of the resurrections built for priests, patterned after the spirituality of the saint of humor, Saint Philip Neri. He's known as the saint who knew how to smile, tell jokes, and laugh without losing his pace, his stride in holiness. And that's one of the things I think we're missing today. You know, there's a lot of sin, turmoil, confusion, evil, trouble in the world today, I believe more than ever in human history. Well, on a global scale, that is. Not on a concentrated scale, but on a global scale. I mean, concentrated in one area, that is. But globally, we're in the greatest time of all evil, I believe. And I think that because of that, people have forgotten the joy that Mother Teresa of Calcutta emphasized, so much so that she wouldn't allow the nuns to join her community unless they smiled. Yes, that's in fact what she told the nuns. I know this as a matter of fact because I met her twice and I spoke with her nuns. And I even read the only official autobiography on her life from a woman from Britain who lived with her. And I say it's the only official autobiography because Mother Teresa of Calcutta told Catherine Spink, spelled with a K, to publish her biography, and that it would be the official one only after her death. And Catherine Spink respected that. And in it, you'll find these truths, you know. And of course, the difficulty she went through founding the community, I mean, it was really, really difficult. One of the nuns that she began the order with was drowned in a flood in Bangladesh because the sari that she wore around her neck was wrapped around her when she was trying to swim. But she went through the fire, Mother Teresa. And the joy that she wanted to transmit to the poorest of the poor, the abandoned on the streets, especially in Calcutta, could only be communicated by a smile, because she didn't initially know their language, and most of them were not even Catholic. And this is why she wore white and a crucifix right beside her shoulder on her chest, so that the first thing she said they would see and the last thing would be Jesus crucified. Why did she wear white? She tells you why. She said, yes, the clergy wear black because they mourn the death of Christ. And that's in fact what the Pope, who established black as the color for the clergy, stated. We're mourning the death of Christ. Mother Teresa added, rightly so, yes, Christ has died, but without the resurrection, the death of Christ has no value. And she's completely right theologically. The crucifixion is not an end in itself. There's no Easter without a Good Friday, and there's no Good Friday without an Easter. So there's nothing wrong with the clergy wearing white, including the nuns. And I say this because there are people out there that refuse to welcome any clergy unless they're wearing the traditional black, and they walk a certain way, and they talk a certain way, and they bend their head when they pray a certain way, and fold their hands a certain way. This is not how God operates, okay? God said there are many mansions in heaven. He doesn't limit himself to one rite, one external observation, one clothing or garment. Small-minded people do. I'm not putting anyone down. I'm simply telling you that God is bigger than human measurements and human categories. The Eastern Rite has all 7 sacraments, just as the West, and they are no less valid than ours. They do not genuflect, they do not fold their hands like we do, but they do it according to their own right. They do not wear the same colors that we do. So this is how we must grow in the divine will with an ecumenical Christian outlook like the apostles had. The apostles were not scholastic, they were not patristic, they were both. They were universal. This split between the East and West, patristic, scholastic, Orthodox, Catholic, began in 1054 with the schism. But in the beginning, it wasn't like this. And that's why the new theology, it's called new theology, but it doesn't mean new that we're adding anything to that which has been taught, but we're explicating, as the Article 66 of the Catholic Catechism states, that which has been revealed but not fully understood. So you have the patristic theology that covered the first 1,000 years of theology, the scholastic, which is East, Orthodox, patristic. Then you have the scholastic, which is Western, Latin, scholastic, which covered the second 1,000 years. And then you have, in the last 150 or 200 years, what's called this ressourcement theology. And this includes the great theologians of these last times, like Yves Congar and Garrigou de Lagrange, and who was a professor of Pope John Paul II, and also Karol Wojtyła and Joseph Ratzinger, and Urs von Balthasar, and Jacques Danielou, and Henry de Lubac, and the list goes on and on. These were all the people I studied, whose materials I studied, including those of the patristics and scholastics. All of these I mentioned are ressourcement theologians. What do? They combine the first 2,000 years of Greek theology, which is patristic, with the second 1,000 years of scholastic theology, which is Latin, into one synthetic expression of faith, which was the way it was in the beginning. And this is a theological expression of what I think we should all welcome externally when it comes to different ways of dressing, reverencing, or expressing our faith by genuflecting or bowing or folding our hands or clasping our hands or holding them down like the Orthodox do.